So getting it kicked off, getting it started, we will start with the USF Dons. Last year, we know this team was coming off of an NCAA tournament bid. They were looking to be able to bounce back and be a bit more and continue that strong stretch and continue this really this. They've had a long stretch of 20-win seasons. They've been 20-plus wins 6 of the last 7 years. They were able to accomplish that a year ago. But like a lot of the teams there in the middle of the conference with, say, like Santa Clara and LMU, these teams, and BYU at the time, these teams all beat up on each other. USF ended up being tied for 5th at 7-9. Chris Gerlefson, head coach, he was in his first full season as head coach, so there was going to be a lot of transition. And also you missed Jamari Bouye, Jan Masalski was gone, Patrick Tape was gone. There was a lot of missing pieces from the NCAA tournament team, so this was going to be a different look, a different team. And that's what we saw a year ago. And we saw a little bit more of it having to be Ty Roberts and Khalil Shabazz, and getting to see a little bit more of some of the rest of this roster. Zane Meeks played a huge role, but all three of them are gone, as well as Julian Rishwain is also gone from this team, who was expected to play a big role a year ago. And so there's not a whole lot returning from. It's not to say that the cupboard is bare. Marcus Williams returns, Josh Coonan returns, Isaiah Hawthorne, Newberry, Saba Gigi Beria all return. So there's some glue guys that are returning from the squad. Marcus Williams, I think, is going to make a big jump in his development. But there you have the guys who are going to do a lot of the dirty work that return. And I think that's a big key for this Dons team moving in. A lot of newcomers, I should say, are also coming in. We've talked off and on about some of these newcomers. You have Jonathan Mogbo coming over from Missouri State, 6'8" forward, redshirt junior, defensive specialist. This was one of the better defensive players in the Missouri Valley. He averaged 8.7 rebounds, more than a steal, more than a block per game in 24 minutes. He was one of the more highly sought after transfers. And we talked about, as kind of mentioned, that they were missing that low post presence, Masalski being gone, Tape being gone. That really made a huge difference for the Dons a couple seasons ago. They needed to get that back. And Mogbo is going to be a huge piece to filling in some of those gaps for USF going into the year. Stefan Todorovic, SMU transfer, also 6'8". This is a guy that they are going to be really dependent upon from the perimeter. Career 35% three-point shooter at SMU. He was invited to the Nike Summit Hoops camp back in 2021, where he averaged a team best 15.7 15.7 points per game. This is a guy who can score. This is a guy who can get buckets, get points, and he's going to be able to help the Dons stretch the floor, which is another thing that they did miss a year ago outside of Shabazz, who really could actually take over games from time to time. Another veteran that they brought in, and I think it's key to note that they're bringing in a lot of guys with experience. And as we know in this conference, experience matters. And having guys who know the college game, know how to go about their business is important. And one of those guys being brought in is Robbie Beasley from UC Davis, 6'3" guard, missed a huge part of last season due to an injury. But this was a 42% three-point shooter a year ago, 9.4 points per game while he was at Davis. The year before that, he was at Montana, was an all Big Sky honorable mention. So he's going to be a guy I think is going to provide a lot of leadership as well. He's going to be a junior. Todorovic is a junior. You have Mogbo, who's a junior. Malik Thomas coming in from USC is also a junior. He didn't get a whole lot of playing time at USC a year ago, but this is a guy who's going to be able to give this team some defensive flexibility. He might be one of the better defenders on the perimeter on this team. So Mogbo will kind of be like that stopper down low, and Thomas should be one of those guys out on the perimeter who's going to be able to be a lockdown guy. before, and I'll make mention of because Robbie Beasley talked about him a little bit. His younger brother Ryan or Ronnie is going to be on this team as well, and this is a guy who was highly sought after as well. He was on the Max Preps All California second team this past season. 24 points, 6.8 rebounds, almost 2 steals a game. Junior year, he was the Chronicles Contra Costa County Tri-Valley Player of the Year with 30 points per game. Another guy who knows how to score. Like, he and his brother are going to put up points. We'll see how much playing time Ronnie gets initially in his first year, because there's a lot of depth on this team. So there's going to be some competition for minutes, and we'll see how this all breaks down. Now, especially considering the guard position, we can't go anywhere without not talking about Mike Sharavjamtz, Mongolian Mike, as he has been dubbed. 6'8" guard, sophomore transfer from Dayton. Didn't get a whole lot of playing time at Dayton. He was still a 23 minute per game guy there, 5.6 points, 2.6 assists per game. But this is a guy who brings a lot of unique talent to the floor, and he'll bring a lot of that to the Dons. This is a guy who is expected to actually be more of a distributor. So this is a guy who could be a 6'8" point guard for USF. He's expected to be one of those guys. There's a lot of high expectations for him. And going into the year, that's going to be a huge story. Maybe one of my key storylines for the Dons going in is, can he meet the hype? Can he meet the expectations that a lot of people have set on him early on? And I don't want to necessarily do that. I want to kind of have like a wait and see approach with him. And now I hope he meets all those expectations and what he's able to do. Because this is a team that on paper looks like a team that could actually be back in an NCAA tournament conversation. They have the pieces. They bring back enough solid contributors. Again, you look at Marcus Williams, you look at Josh Kuhn and Isaiah Hawthorne, Newberry. These are going to be guys who are going to play significant roles for this team. And then paired with Mogbo, Sharavjamtz, Beasley, Todorovic, like Thomas, like there's a lot of depth to this team, maybe a little deeper than this team has been over the last few years. And that's going to serve USF well. It's going to serve them well as they go through the season. And as we talk about these guys, there's a few storylines as I'm kind of thinking it through and thinking about USF and what they might be. I've already talked about, can Mongolian Mike meet the hype? I think that's number one. Number two is this transfer class for real, and how quickly can they hit the ground running? Like a lot of other teams around the country, there was a lot of turnover. There was a lot of people hitting the portal, and a lot of teams are going to be trying to figure out how to gel quickly. And this is true of a lot of the other teams around the WCC as well. USF is going to have to deal with that. USF is going to have to figure out how are they going to play with each other and how to do this quickly. You have a lot of guys who have a lot of different skill sets. The one thing I think is that they fit well together. They seem to have complementary talents. This way that USF has most of the holes filled, or at least as we see, do they have these holes filled? It seems like they have the point guard. It seems like they have they've added some of that defense that they sorely missed a year ago. It seems that they have key glue guys coming back. It seems that they have enough guys who are going to be able to score. They have enough shooters. And this is a team we know relies heavily upon its ability to maximize and really utilize its analytics to be able to succeed. And so get a lot of good 3-point shooters on this team. So it will be fascinating to see if what we see on paper, what we see in the analytics is going to translate on the court. And another point, and reference it a little bit, has USF solved its interior defense problem? We saw 2 years ago what a difference both Patrick Tepe and Yawen Masalski made for this team. because the pairing of Bouye and Shabazz had been there for a few years, and they had been decent, but they couldn't get over that hump. They couldn't break through and make the NCAA tournament. And the second they solved this interior defensive problem, it all changed. This team became the team that the potential they all had. And we got to see them on a bigger stage, and they really impressed on that bigger stage. Now does the addition of Jonathan Mogbo solve that? Does the development of Gigi Berria help to solve that? Does the progression of some of the other members of this roster help on the front line? Is the front line deep enough to be able to make that front line a strength rather than maybe one of their weaknesses, which you could point to was a weakness a year ago, just based on the types of players that they had down there? Zane Meeks played a lot at the 4 and the 5 a year ago, and that's not where he should have been playing. There was a lot you could point to, a lot of things, just rotationally wise, development wise, that they missed a year ago. And they may have solved it. But that's going to be one of the keys to watch going into this year. Can they rebound well enough? Can they defend the paint well enough? Can they defend the rim well enough? Are they going to be able to do enough things on the defensive end down low to be able to get over the hump? Because as we know, in this conference especially, you're going to have to defend the paint well, because Gonzaga and St. Mary's both have legit size and skilled size. And if you hope to be able to kind of break through against either one of them, you better be able to play well in the paint. And with all of that, thinking about all of these different scenarios, different storylines, can they get back to the NCAA tournament? Can USF return to the place they were just a couple seasons ago? And what will it take? I think what it's going to take is them really doing well, is one, all these things starting to come together. It may not need to be all of it, but it needs to be most of these things coming to fruition. It needs to be, one, the interior defense has to be solved. That has to be one of the things that goes well for them. They also have to be able to they also have to have quickly developed leadership from the guard spots, because the one thing we know in college basketball is you can have a great front line, but if you don't have guards who can perform on a high level on almost a night in, night out basis, you are not going to be able to reach the NCAA tournament, and then you will not be able to succeed once you're there. That is another thing that has to go right for USF. That doesn't mean that it has to be certain guys. It doesn't mean it has to be Mongolian Mike. It doesn't mean it has to be Malik Thomas. But it does have to be some combination of these guys that are going to do well. Otherwise, there's no way that USF is going to be able to reach the NCAA tournament. Now, as far as the tournament goes, they have the schedule that I think that can help them get there. We always talk about the strength of schedule, and do you have the games not only to get you there, but also do you have enough to maybe overcome a pitfall here and there? Because nobody is going to be perfect. Everybody is going to lose a game. Everybody's going to lose many games. And it's a matter of minimizing your mistakes, but then also capitalizing on the opportunities you have. And if you only have one or two chances, it really puts the pressure on all the other games to be perfect. And I think USF has done a really good job of building a schedule that allows them to have multiple opportunities, but then also they don't have to be completely perfect. And as I look through the schedule, there are a few games that really stand out. And there's a number of games that stand out to me. On November 12th, they'll be at Boise State, which obviously is going to be a really good game. Boise has been in the tournament each of the last couple of years. They'll be heading down to Phoenix to take on Grand Canyon. That same weekend, they'll take on either South Carolina or DePaul. They have Arizona State, Vanderbilt, both on the road. They have a neutral with Utah State, and then they will be hosting Fresno State. So a lot of Mountain West teams that really do expect to be at the top half of that league. Many who we know are year in, year out NCAA tournament contenders. And then also a couple of big conference teams, Arizona State, who they throttled a year ago. I wouldn't expect that to happen this year. I would expect the game to be much more competitive this time around. I'm sure Bobby Hurley will make sure that they are ready this time. And then a trip to Vanderbilt is also going to be a huge thing for this team. I expect them to not be perfect through the stretch. I expect them to lose some of these games, but I expect them to win some of these games. You have to remember last year, after that the Arizona State blowout, that only a couple nights later, then they lost to a UT Arlington team that they should not have lost to. And part of that was a scheduling thing. Part of that was just bad timing, but they fell flat in that game. And it really did make a huge difference in the metrics and the outlook for that USF team. This schedule gives them plenty of opportunities to not have to rely on one or the other. They'll have multiple shots at good teams to build a resume. And of course, then once again in the conference play, they're going to have to handle their business. That does mean you're not gonna be able to lose to the likes of San Diego or Portland, which they lost to a year ago. Or I would say even just like the Pepperdines. LMU and Santa Clara are going to be interesting just based on where their numbers are going into the season, where they end up net-wise. And I think that's going to be the challenge is with those three, because there's a chance that all three of them could end up cannibalizing each other. And if you're going to make the NCAA tournament, you're going to have to be the team that avoids being cannibalized. You're going to have to avoid that for the most part. And then with St. Mary's Gonzaga, and if you do enough in the non-conference, you may not need to beat either of them in conference play. USF proved that just a couple of years ago, that they didn't have to beat St. Mary's. They didn't have to beat Gonzaga, and they still made the NCAA tournament because of the schedule they had otherwise. Now that being said, they did still end up as a 10 seed, and I think they should have been much higher than that. I think they got jobbed on that front. But it does show that it is possible to build your schedule, do enough in the non-conference, and not have to beat either St. Mary's or Gonzaga to get into the NCAA tournament. That also, now part of that is because there's also no BYU in the conference now, so you do have to make up for that a little bit in the non-conference. I think USF has given themselves enough opportunities for that. So we'll see. This USF team, I think, is going to be fascinating to watch all year long. I think they have a lot of interesting pieces. They're probably going to be one of the more exciting teams in the WCC again. And the one thing we know is that one of the more exciting games to watch during the conference schedule is going to be when USF and Santa Clara meet up, because those two have given us some of the best games all year long over the last few seasons. So I expect those games to be must-watch appointment television between the Dons and the Broncos. So looking at this USF team in the overall scheme, this is a team that to me does feel like a 20-win team again. Do I think they're going to get to the NCAA tournament? I think that they're probably going to be just on the outside looking in. I do think that there's a high potential for this team. I think they also have, of the other three, the highest floor. I do think that this is a team that's going to be exciting. They're going to play well. I don't expect them to finish any lower than 5th going into the year. And I'm going to do the full predictions later on in the month. But this is about where I think they'll be finishing somewhere between 3 and 5 in WCC play. They'll be a 20-plus win team. That's about where I see USF finishing up this coming year, and maybe just on the outside. Probably, I'm thinking an NIT bid for this team.